All right, let's go. Welcome everybody watching on YouTube to another short speedrun episode. We were just reading about Paul Morphy and his exploits, so hopefully the tone is set. But probably just two games today because it is getting pretty late at the time of recording. Without further ado, as we like to do, let's start with a 10-minute game. And we have the white pieces. Let's see what we're going to get. Perhaps a Gleck. Okay. Our opponent is confuzzled. Ooh, d5. Okay, the elephant gambit. I'm glad we got this because it's a fairly serious sideline, and I would say it's sort of the cousin or the sibling or whatever of the Latvian gambit, which is f5. And both of these gambits are largely discredited, but without question, the elephant gambit is both more dangerous and both much more popular, especially nowadays. Can be a very good surprise weapon. White actually can get into a lot of trouble if you laugh at this. So there are multiple ways to get an advantage against the elephant gambit. My preferred weapon is knight takes e5, and I do remember having gotten this in previous speedruns, so you could probably hunt that down. I don't believe that we faced queen e7 in that game. Black's main move is bishop d6, and I'll run you through the basic theory that you have to know. There's not a lot of it. But queen e7 is not really a move. Now, of course, we're not trying to win a pawn in this position. The biggest problem with the elephant gambit is actually that black just lacks development. And one way or the other, that is going to be his undoing if we play properly. So the knight is hanging. Instead of moving it immediately, let's extract a little bit more juice from the position with d4. Our opponent responds f6. And here, again, very important not to get impatient. Some of you might be not queen g5, but queen h5 is tempting, but it's a trap. Black plays g6, knight takes g6. This is very common in a few of these trappy lines. Queen takes e4 check, and that is a fork because then the queen picks up the knight and we have no follow-up. So you might say, but if I have to drop the knight back, isn't that unpleasant? Like, isn't black then going to take our pawn with their pawn and move the knight, force the knight to move again? Not if you choose the correct square. The correct square is not f3, it's actually d3. I think this is the secret sauce. And the point is actually fairly straightforward. There's nothing tactical about this move. It's really strategic in nature. If black now plays d takes e4, think about queen e6 is an outlandish move. You should pause the video quickly and see if you can understand, what's so great about knight d3. What is our move? And then why is white much better in that resulting position? This might be a mouse slip or you just didn't have the energy to reach e4. At this point, there are already multiple options. If we want to cash in our chips, we can now check on h5 and pick up d5. That's two extra pawns. If we want to play for mate, we can simply develop our pieces with knight to c3. And actually, I think a move like knight c3 is completely overwhelming. Not just because of the huge development advantage and the vulnerable queen, but also, of course, because black has played f6. So e5 is great here. Everything is good, but let's just play a simple move. It's, I'm sure, not the top engine move, but who cares? Yeah, now the answer to the question I posed earlier, a move that we still end up playing is knight to f4. So had black captured on e4 here, we still would have played knight f4, and this square is absolutely fantastic because not only is queen h5 now a serious idea, but the knight is just presiding over all of these key light squares without hampering the development of the dark squared bishop, which, if needed, can go up to e3. But of course, the bishop that we want to develop first is this one, and we'll put it on c4. And we've been patient, but now it's time to start winning the game. This process will not take long. Who can propose the simplest winning option here? I think it's as good a time as any to make this move. Nothing earth-shattering here whatsoever. Now queen h5. Knight d7 is actually a really poor move because now king d8, knight e6 now is mate, or black loses their queen. It's checkmate to the king or the queen. And if g6, this is the reason I played bishop c4, to prevent queen f7 in response to knight takes g6, which is a theme that everybody should be totally familiar with. Now we can grab the rook, and black also loses this knight on g8, which was trapped. Let's take it, and we are simply up a rook. Okay, so black, I assume, wants to castle long. Black finally manages to develop. Let's needle at this bishop first and see where it goes. Let's chase it away again. Force it back to d7. Okay, bishop e6. Many roads lead to Rome here. Okay, there's a sequence that I kind of like, which is to trade. And of course here, it's good practice to extricate your queen, but I think a lot of people just kind of automatically assume that it's going to get trapped if it remains on h8. And that's really not the case. Like, even if you gave black 2 or 3 moves, there's no way to set up any kind of entrapment mechanism because you don't have enough pieces and we have an escape route. But forget all of that. There's an easy move that essentially wins the game, and it's bishop h6. If black castles queenside, which he does, we simply take the bishop. And we will use this bishop. Well, never mind. I was expecting queen f7. We would have used this bishop as leverage to get the queens off the board. Ooh, terrifying move. Of course, we should escape the center of the board as quickly as possible. The queen side seems to be the safer place to be. Of course, this is not a pawn that we care about or that poses any danger at all. Now, I think a great opportunity to run away from the pin and preserve our bishop while also preventing, any sort of check on e3. Not that it does anything. Hopefully, this game doesn't last too long. I know it's not the most interesting phase. And yeah, this, of course, is one of the downsides of the 10-minute format, is that sometimes people just install it out. Now, of course, notice that I paused there for a second, right? And I'm not playing a single move instantly because of queen e1, but this is just hot air. And who can tell me what is the most clinical way to respond? Yeah, you actually don't have to take the queen first. Now, this can be a very dangerous tactical theme, right? If there was no rook and no knight, this actually would be mating. So it's worth noting, here we have 2 extra rooks. There's no reason to give either of them away. If black promotes, we can take either queen, and the rooks will defend each other through the X-ray. Yeah, this dude, I think, has had better days in his playing career. But hey, we all have bad days. Well, he promoted and I didn't, so he won that particular game. All right, so I won't do too much theory. I mean, actually, you'll be very surprised, I think, at how much theory the Elephant Gambit has. I have a 400-page book on it, actually, that came out not so long ago. So there's actually a lot there. All of these little weird gambits, you should take them very seriously because they're not losing. And even to get like a sizable advantage, you need to know quite a bit of stuff. So it's worth investing. If you're 13, 1400, you're going to face them a lot, like the Stafford, the Elephant, the Latvian, anything that you come across where, you're not totally sure how to proceed, you shouldn't procrastinate on it. So, and hopefully you followed this in your head. Knight takes e5. And here, bishop d6 is what everybody plays. We play d4, and here I mentioned that f6 loses to queen h5. So black has to recover the pawn. And here, I really like this move, bishop c4. This really shuts down the line. It takes all the fun out for black. And I've shown this before, by the way. Black basically has to take on e5. Only move. Because there's no other good way to defend the f7 pawn. I'm checking the database right now to see if there are any other moves. No. Literally there's no other moves. Bishop e6, I suppose, is possible, but then you just take on e6 and black loses. F takes e6 here. And if black takes on e5 now, you can desperado on f7 and actually keep the queens on the board with another intermezzo. So bishop takes e5. This is the critical moment. Does anybody know what the secret move is that makes this line tick? And the fact that I'm asking you here is a huge hint. Okay, this is not the Jerome Gambit, so people are proposing bishop f7. You have no pieces in the attack. It's queen h5. So intermezzo, what is the point? You don't want to take the bishop here because we lose castling rights, and that's just an equal endgame. And of course, the point is queen takes d4 seems to defend the bishop and create an escape hatch for the king. However, after queen takes f7 check, this is pretty disastrous. And the simplest thing for white here is actually to recover the piece. Just take the knight on g8, setting up, the massive, potentially the threat of bishop e6 check, winning the exchange. The move that most people play here is g5, opening up, obviously, a defender on the rook. What else have people played? Knight to c6 has been played twice as well. Here, actually, it's not a good idea to play bishop e6. And this is an instructive moment, right? You don't want to tunnel vision these ideas. It's still winning for white, but you should see that this kind of thing can get dangerous. No need for that. You can actually give a super nasty check on f7. So knight c6, queen f7 check. And if the king drops back to d8, you just go bishop g5 check, bring out the knight, leaving this bishop hanging because of the threat of rook to d1, winning the queen. So g5 is essentially what people play. And by people, I mean like 7 people who have reached this position. Now you can just go knight c3. I mean, huge development advantage. Bishop e3 is coming and the game is over. So queen takes d4 is invalid. Black does not have many other moves, and that is why queen e7 is almost exclusively played. g6 drops the rook with a fork. Knight h6, bishop takes h6, loses the game. So 8 people played queen f6 here, and this just walks into d takes e5, so it's pretty foolish. After queen e7, this is the only line where you go into the endgame. You take on e5 with the queen. This endgame is very bad for black. You have to know a few moves, but if you do, black is in trouble. So, of course, black plays knight c6. This is the main line. And here you have to know this move knight to c3. Now, of course, a lot of people without experience in this line, the automatic move is bishop f4, but this walks into knight e7, knight g6. So actually, you sack the pawn back, which is a pretty funny twist. It's white who sacks the pawn in the elephant gambit, but it's largely temporary because after bishop b3, the bishop pair and the fact that black is severely underdeveloped, that's what kills him because bishop f4 is coming. This is just an awful position. Most people go knight e7, multiple options here, but I actually really like this idea, knight b5, king d8 is forced, and back to c3. So you simply deprive black of castling rights, return to c3, and then you're going to go bishop f4, castle queenside, and black is under a tremendous amount of attack. Like, for example, f5, bishop f4. I mean, you can kind of see where this is headed. Let's say the knight drops back, you castle. I mean, if the king moves, you can pick up c7. So let's say the bishop blocks, calmly dropping the bishop back to e3, and then rerouting it to d4 with the unstoppable threat of bishop takes g7. So if I were you watching on YouTube, it's just late right now, so I don't want to, spend 30 minutes on this. But I would, investigate this endgame for a couple of minutes on your own. Check out the alternatives to knight e7 in this position. The last thing I'll say is if knight f6, which is very natural, you still play bishop f4, skewering the c7 pawn. And here there's not much to analyze. So that's that. I've also looked at d takes e4, and this I will leave for another time. Here the move is bishop c4, and white is essentially winning. But, there's a couple things to note here as well. The way the game went, the only instructive part of the game was, first of all, the fact that this is a trap. Good to make a mental note of this. And the second thing is, had black played the civilized d takes e4, our idea, again, was knight f4, as we did in the game, clamping down on all of these squares and keeping the other minor pieces free. Really not sure what black was doing this game. I mean, by this point, black's position is completely destroyed. All right, let's do, we could do another 10-minute or we can do some 5. Let's do one more 10-minute game because why not? Actually, okay, this is good. Let's play a Sicil for the kill. Hopefully we get a mainline knight arf. Although, yeah, I mean, at this level, very few people actually go for the knight arf. They play some manner of the Bowdler. What a surprise. We've never faced this before in the speedrun. All right, so I'm not going to keep repeating again and again and again, the same analysis. I'm going to make the moves a little faster here. However, this is a slightly different version of the Bowdler. And here it's, worth being disciplined if you're playing black and you want to make sure that you can still play the knight arf. If you play the move knight to c6, white can play pawn to d4. And after the trade, we've actually reached, you have been what's called move ordered into a different Sicilian, the Rouser. And against the Rouser, bishop c4 is a very legit line. So you can play it, but you're going to be in something that you don't know if white plays d4. The move you want to play if you're a knight arf player is e6. And the point is, if white pushes d4 now, you take, the knight captures, and you play a6, transposing into the Fischer-Sozin variation of the knight arf. Clearly, this is not going to happen at these lower levels, because if someone's playing bishop c4, they're not thinking about like high-level move order details, but nonetheless. Okay, now we can develop our king side. Doesn't matter in which order we play all of these normal moves, a6, castles, b5, knight c6, blah, blah, blah. The position is pretty sterile. But e5, very common at this level to push e5. It's not a scary move at all. It may appear that white has sort of space advantage and our position is cramped, but that's a complete and total illusion, because the actual important factor here is the fact that we have superior central control at castle. Why am I saying that? Because, well, we have a pawn on c5 and white has a pawn on d3. So it's very clear, who the boss is in the room and, who's calling the shots. It's the c5 pawn because we're controlling the d4 square. And if we kick this knight away from e5, which we are going to do, and by the way, there's no rush to do that. That knight is loose. It causes us no harm at all. So we'll do it at a natural moment. But first, there's something that we can do on the queen side, which is what? What move have we not yet made? And as knight or flares, that can be slightly embarrassing. Yes, a6. Now you might say, well, wait a second. White can just play a4. What is the point of that? There is a specific point. Actually, the point of a6 in the actual Najdorf is typically to cover the b5 square. And I want to do that here too. In the event that we play a move like queen to c7, I don't want to allow in the future an annoying knight jump. There is another reason, but I'll get to that one later. Okay, let's think. I think it's a good time to start smoking out the knight from e5. And I don't see a reason why we can't play queen c7. Because bishop f4, we can always play bishop d6. White actually could very well lose the knight on e5 because this knight can always jump to the side. This is commonly missed, by the way. Bishop f4, bishop d6, queen g3, knight h5 resigns. White's already in trouble. Huge trouble. In fact, white might be lost. Wow. I think white can save the piece, but he needs to be very precise in this position. And even then, it's quite unpleasant. So we'll see what happens. Knight g6? No, but the queen hangs after knight h5. Queen to e3, of course, is the other candidate move, but here we have a different way of winning the piece, and you should try to figure out what it is. Oh, okay. So, okay, hopefully it makes sense to people that anytime you have this arrangement, I don't know why people at this level miss knight h5 so often. These knight moves to the side is often just not something that you really think about, but you have to. And this is what pattern recognition is all about. Like, if you keep careful track of all of these ideas as you come across them and, do a good job of reminding yourself, yes, this exists, eventually this, will make its mark on your play. This is what it means to have chess knowledge. Boom. And now the knight is without a defender. Yeah, I knew this was likely to happen because I've played quite a few games at this level. Again, hopefully the conversion will be quick. We can just follow up with knight c6 and or b5, bishop b7 is how I'm going to complete the development. Okay, we can actually play b5 here if we wanted to. Taking the rook here will get the queen trapped, but why? There's absolutely no reason to seek adventure when we can just go knight c6 first, and now we can play b5 with the aim of getting this pawn is hanging. I don't need it. Development is more important. We've already won a piece. Remember the law of diminishing chess material returns. Okay, now, well, knight d4 is way too tempting and will probably lead to a quick checkmate. Yeah, you can really sense for people watching on YouTube, someone in my chat just said, this is why high-level openings like this are so dominant. You can see the power of the Sicilian. There's very few openings that allow you to win like this against play that's fairly normal. It didn't seem that white did anything outwardly horrible. Okay, by the way, I'm just trying to find a force. I don't see a forced win. I think queen c6 is very tempting. I think there's a simple way to do it, which is just to grab this bishop and get the rook to d8. And, just look at this. Rook d4 is also potentially on the horizon. Our opponent preempts it. Now, one move that you often want to play in these types of positions is f5, which is a really important idea. It does many things. It kind of restricts white in general, but it also prepares a rook lift, and it acts as a bulwark against, whatever defenders. By that, I just mean the knight, because that's the only piece white has left. Otherwise, I could go knight e4 and stuff. Okay, it's still not a great idea to take that pawn on h2, I think. Actually, wait a second. We can take and drop back to f4, and the h file is open. No. I stand corrected, especially given what our opponent just played. Now bishop f4. Queen is defending it. Everything is defended. And mate is happening very shortly. Yeah, hopefully we get a resigns. Well, now we definitely will. There we go. Okay, smooth game. Just a few comments here. So we face this sort of delayed Bowdler. I'll check this very quickly in ChessBase just to make sure I'm giving you the right advice. Not the most common move order, obviously. Yeah, so e6 is the main move, and it is the best move according to the engine. And again, if white plays d4, we get the Najdorf Fischer-Sozin attack, which generally arises from, the Najdorf move order. If white plays bishop c4, black automatically responds with e6. And this is sort of the stem position. If you play knight c6, again, white could play d4, and now we get the Fischer variation of the Rausser Sicilian. Okay, so this general concept is important. In anti-Sicilians, it's important to choose the right setup in case white reverts back to the open Sicilian. Okay, so d3 is fine. We played bishop e7. That's fine. And a good takeaway for people is that these positions are actually quite bad for white because of our central control and our grip on the d4 square. And this is what's known as pseudoactivity. This knight is not actually active. And the fact that it's in the center does not automatically make it a good piece. It's a very bad piece because it lacks pawn support. And to establish pawn support, you have to play this incredibly weakening move f4, to which we can respond bishop d7 and knight c6, so the knight is not permanent anyway. Okay, so a6. Queen f3 is already nearly the decisive mistake, I think. Actually, bishop f4 is the decisive mistake. And I'm just checking something. Oh, yeah. So basically, white's last chance was to go knight g4 here. I mean, who wants to play this? But you have to. Otherwise, white loses the knight, and now we would have taken, and b5, bishop b7. Black is a much better position. But here, actually, queen e3 might have been the harder move to refute. Who can spot? Yeah, it's fairly easy. And in fact, against queen e2, the same idea still wins. So let's do it in this version. Slightly trickier. What is black's move? Black wins a piece here by force. Let's see who can name a nice little... Nothing special. No, knight g4 hangs the knight. No, it technically doesn't hang the knight, but it's just a trade. Knight h5 does hang the knight. Pawn b5 is a good move, but it doesn't change affairs after bishop b3. Still, actually, this is a pretty instructive. Nobody in the chat has gotten it yet. Okay, one person has gotten it. When you say c6, I assume you mean knight c6, and that is correct. And what you're missing is that after knight takes c6, you might be automatically considering queen takes, but bishop takes f4, and the knight is trapped. It's just trapped on c6. Now, this is much easier, I think, if white plays... Here, I think everybody would have seen knight c6, because it's easy to spot this because it hits the queen. As a matter of fact, white can throw in this check, but we don't have to take. We just slide our king away, and then we slide our bishop away, and now the knight is trapped, and we can pick it up on the next move. So this also has a little tricky component to it. But after queen e2, something to remember. Lure the knight in, and then take the other piece, and then the knight is trapped. If white plays g3, you can actually still take the knight because you're hitting the rook. All right, and that's what I wanted to emphasize. Once the bishop is lost, so is the knight, and so is the game. Any questions? Is there one single decisive mistake? Yes, the decisive mistake is bishop f4. I mean, it's -1 after knight g4. Position is miserable, but the majority of the fight is still ahead. Let's finish with a 5-minute game. These have been pretty short, but hopefully short and sweet. Not every game has to be a mythical, 70-move fight. All right, so here we're really making some rating progress, which means more Gleck systems and more main lines, and I love that. Again, f5. I mean, it's crazy. I've still only gotten 2 or 3 Glecks. I spoke too soon. We need him to attend the Gleckture for sure. Now, obviously, if you're a player fairly well versed in general chess principles, your intended reaction to this move should immediately be d4. Your hand has to be playing this move before your brain even registered what happened. But now an important detail. If you automatically take on e4, those knights are sitting ducks, and black goes d5 and establishes a wedge with e4. So you actually want to take the other pawn, kind of like in the elephant gambit. Now, there's probably some theory here. I don't particularly know it. I'm just going to play based on general principles, and I think we'll get a decent position. Now, I see this. Potzer sees pin. Potzer does pin. Maybe this is some trappy line. I doubt it. I think it's just garbage. Okay, whatever. Now, of course, we want to develop this bishop to c4. And actually, we will. Which might come to the surprise of some of you, because you're like, well, wait a second. Doesn't this walk into precisely what I just advised against, which is d5? Yes, but tactically, black's position just does not hold up. There's too many weaknesses. And so I can smell that there's a tactic even before I see it. And if there isn't a tactic, we can just go bishop b3 And the pressure on the d5 pawn, the fact that black now lacks a dark squared bishop, the position's going to collapse. Actually, I think I'm just going to go bishop b3. I won't even bother. And now I'm in a castle because this is knight takes knight is not an option for black. Okay, and queen e8 is, of course, sort of a blunder. We can now play bishop takes f6 and bishop takes d5. As a matter of fact, even the move f4 here, I think is fantastic. But let's cash in. Why not? Takes d5. That's one pawn, and that's the entire center. And now can we snag a second pawn? Bishop takes e4, knight takes e5, d takes e5. And I mentioned this before. You should already have noted the back rank. The moment rook takes f6 was played, you should have just said to yourself, or I guess after king h8, like, I need to think about the back rank, not every day, like the Roman Empire, but this is what allows you to see that black cannot take twice because of queen to d8. And that might not stop our opponent from taking twice. No, it will. But this last recapture is what opened up the d file. And now we can just support the pawn. Not only are we up 2 pawns, but just look at black's coordination. We can grab another pawn, but I think we have a better sequence, and it, I think, is quite natural. Or actually, wait, no. We should be careful. I was going to say f5, but that needlessly allows the bishop to jump to c4, which is, how do you spot that? Well, f5 is a risky move because there's one instance where your most important pawn is undefended. So, I was expecting bishop g8, but in fact, bishop c4 then hits the rook, and you might have to go e6 and sack the exchange. Unnecessary. I think a nice, calm antidote to that is just to go queen e2, because this jumps ahead of rook d8, which I think our opponent is going to play anyway, if I know 1800s. And I think I do. Now we can play f5. He waited for me to say that. And of course, the point is to go e6 and drive the completely decisive pawn wedge into the position. And now let's finish the game, not missing the moment, right? Again, no automatic moves. Every move is a potential opportunity to accelerate the progress of victory. You can go g4, which typically, of course, you're afraid of bishop g4 and rook g6. But in this case, well, that square is multiple times defended. I mean, black is just driven to the fringes of the board and then buried there. Okay, check. No problem. Rook d2 is probably what our opponent is banking on. There are no squares even, but we should be cautious because rook d2 and rook takes h5. If that happens, then black actually might generate some threats. Not worth allowing that. So what could our response be? What would you do? There is, I think, a very nice way to win here. The correct move is queen g2, I think. Yeah. Now, you were allowed. Okay, never mind. He takes the pawn. Queen e3 check, king h1, rook d2. And I'll make these moves on the board after the game. We had e7, again exploiting the back rank. Now we shouldn't go e7 because of rook e8. We could, but again, unnecessary. What's the fastest way to win? I think it's just to bring everything into the center. Eventually, we're going to go e7, just a couple more tempi to improve our position. Still, I wouldn't go e7. I would go bishop f3, bishop d3, something like this. Closing off the d file, maybe also lifting the rook up. Well, not now, to e3 at least. We can also grab b7. Let's grab b7 because this is going to make it easier after we play e7 and black plays rook e8 to make the move bishop b5 if we need. Now let's keep grabbing while we're at it. Okay. Now, there's so many winning moves. I'm struggling to understand what separates one move from the other. Actually, I played a very sloppy move because I allowed queen g7. And after rook g1, black has queen b7, and it's still winning. That should not have been allowed, but we have bishop e4. But it's not good practice to have to rely on a random tactical move, So I apologize. I was just overwhelmed by the abundance of choices. Let's see if I can set up a pretty... our opponent is intent on losing in the straightforward way. Of course, we have a tactic here. With rook to g8, I have to play fast because I have no pre-move here. So let me accelerate the pace a little bit. Well, that won't be necessary because we have mate. Yeah, I was a little bit too cavalier in that conversion stage, but it is what it is. I've actually never faced this line, to my knowledge. I don't know if it's, a known trappy continuation or if it just loses after d4. Let me check very quickly. Okay, so... Yeah, there are games in the database. Nakamura has played it, but it's very bad. Very, very. It's like +2 after d4, which is a lot. Now, the only way for black to play this properly, okay, I've seen this before, actually, is to take on d4 and knight f6. This is like how Hikaru played it. And the point is, no, but this is still garbage. Knight takes f5, black plays d5. But here, this is a bunch of hot air because you just play knight takes d5. And if black plays knight takes to on e4, then you can just drop the other knight back to e3, supporting its brother. You're up a pawn, and black's king is wide open. If knight d5, you play queen d5. And the only thing to remember is that the knight on c6 is hanging. So black technically will recover one pawn at the cost of ruining a structure. But obviously, this is just no fun endgame for black. Delayed Latvian, even worse than the Latvian Gambit. So our opponent played fe, which most people are going to play if they go into this line for whatever reason. And yeah, knight f6, bishop g5. Apparently not the best move. Wow. This is where I learned too. The best move is bishop c4. And at this point, I thought it was premature because of d5. Oh, but there's a lovely tactic here. Last question to you guys. Who can spot the tactical sequence? It's really nice. Ooh. Yeah, this is actually Paravyan Nakamura followed this Speed Chess Championship 2022. Unbelievable. He won. Paravyan found the combination and still lost. Okay, Paravyan just lost his mind. Yes, you guys got it. It's knight takes d5. Knight takes d5, deflection, queen h5, g6, knight takes g6. But after hg, critical moment. Were you planning to take the rook? Because that's boring. Black has 2 pieces for a rook. No, you have to take the pawn. King can't go to e7. King has to go to d7. And here David Paravyan played this mindless move, queen f7, which allows black to stabilize and get the king to a relatively safe square. There's no need for that. Just take the knight. Just take the knight, girl. And what was David afraid of? He was probably afraid of knight takes d4. Now you're threatening mate in 1, of course, on e6. So if black plays queen to e8, trying to guard against that, you can interpose the bishop, completely winning. But after knight takes d4, you meet fire with fire, and you bring out the bishop to g5. Queen is nearly trapped. There's a game in the database, Mark Esserman versus Oleg Zykov, who is a FM, US Chess League Rapid 2009. That's really cool. Mark Esserman found all of these moves. Black played queen e8. Mark played bishop f7 correctly, forcing the queen up to e5. Here, Mark castled queenside, which is winning. But even stronger would have been bishop f6, ending the game immediately because you're winning everything on the board. For instance, queen d6, there is bishop e8 check, queen f5, f7 check, bishop takes h8, and it's mate like this. Huh, look at this mate with the queen and both bishops, the only pieces participating. Wow. Kudos to Mark. So that's what happens to this. This line is actually horrible. But bishop g5 is also quite practical, and, you know, black now has to suddenly play like a computer just to get out of the opening, more or less. But just the one thing I wanted to draw your attention to, a couple of things. First of all, no, d6 is not a move. What am I saying? Because of knight f7. So black has to play d5. So there is no second of all, so just first of all. Why is this position so bad, right? You really should try to understand that, because it might not be immediately obvious like how close black is to collapsing here. And you should kind of try to make this clear to yourself. Now, I'm actually just checking the evaluation out of curiosity. Okay, it's clear advantage for white. Now, the computer finds some bizarre ways to hold the line. But let's say black plays bishop e6, which actually was the correct move. Queen e8, of course, blunders away the game immediately. What would be your intended response here for white? What do you think white should play? And this idea is very important. Okay, so some of you are saying c4. That's definitely a logical move, but it doesn't work tactically. Yeah, very good. I would play f4. Actually, this is better than f3 because f3, black is not compelled to take. Like, black can slide the queen out of the way, and then if you just kind of casually get into this position, black is okay. But f4 is very strong because it supports the knight. If black doesn't take en passant, great. I mean, we're dominating in the center, and you don't care about black's passed pawn on e4. It's not the end game. And you can actually drive this one down to f5. The bishop is nowhere good to go. Has to go back to f7. Now you can smoke the knight out, and white gets a serious attack. So black is likely to take on f3. You will then take with a rook, and you just have a huge initiative. I mean, that's all there is to it. Last thing I'll say is that you should be comfortable being able to transform your advantage from one thing to another. So if black goes queen to d6, the way to keep the advantage is to cash your bishop pair in. What do you get in return? Well, you get a long-term unsafe king for black after the g-pawn has to capture, and the knight on d3 is super strong because it can head both directions. The queen is coming out to f3. What do we not care about at all? This pawn structure. It's fantastic because it has this little pawn chain that keeps the knight restricted. So just because it's visually ugly, no problem at all. So from a practical perspective, black's position is nearly unplayable, as evidenced by the fact that our opponent took 0 moves to blunder the game away. And okay, I was kind of sloppy in my conversion, but I don't have much to say. I mean, once the bishop was trapped, the game is over. There was a cute line if black tried this to play e7. Obviously, rook takes g2, e8 is mate. And that's all she wrote, folks. Yeah, sloppy moment here because I saw queen g7 and missed queen b7 completely. But fortunately, bishop e4 to the rescue. And of course, here you have to take with the king. If you nonchalantly take with the rook, suddenly the queens are swapped and the win is no longer easy, if it even exists. If black drives the queen back to g7, you simply block with the bishop. And queen to b6 check also exists. And queen takes e6, whatever. You can also just move the bishop back. All right, folks, let's wrap up for the night. It's pretty late. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys later.